Okay, my name is Linda Sally, and I'm the president of the African American Museum of Bucks County. We are here to tell the untold story of things that has happened, the people that have passed through Bucks County and was never recognized. And today is exciting because we're going to tell a story about the Civil War soldiers that was never recognized. It's important to know the story about African Americans to give everyone a better understanding. The problem that we have today is that we don't know each other because we don't talk to each other. We don't communicate. And this is a way to communicate with everyone so that you can see the value of what the African Americans have brought to Bucks County. Watching this video, I'm hoping that it will enlighten them, the people, to understand the walk of African Americans, understand their resilience in surviving in a world that didn't welcome them, and give them a better understanding of us.
Bucks County was very strong in support of the Civil War, even though there were some divisions with Bucks County up north, Bucks County down south. But in general, it's American history. When you think about whatever they did, those individuals did in Bucks County, it was a part of American history. And I think oftentimes what happens is that we forget about the history that made this country, the history that was good, history that was bad. This was good history. This is good history because it recognizes those individuals who made a contribution to Bucks County history, and in turn made a contribution to American history.
And what I want my children to know, what I want Noah, Caleb, and Eli, and Zoe to understand is that the history of the Civil War is one that blacks in particular, African Americans, have to begin to own. The narrative of whether the war was for preserving the Union or for ending slavery, it's a yes and a no, it's a no and a yes, it's a yes and a yes, and all those things are true. But for the U.S. colored troops and for African Americans in this country, it was about citizenship. It was about full freedom. It was about proving your worth as a citizen of this country.
So Moses Suber was a 30-year-old male living in Lower Makefield Township with a confectionery shop in Fallsington. When the Battle of Gettysburg, the news of that battle came to Lower Makefield Township. So he and 150 other men from Lower Makefield Township got their horses and rode west as a volunteer cavalry unit from Pennsylvania. They got to Gettysburg and headed south toward Maryland to chase Lee back to Virginia. And Subers had been elected as the lieutenant. So as the lieutenant, he's first in line. And he was immediately shot by one of Jubal Early's cavalry dismounted in the bushes. So he's taken back to Philadelphia to KMAC Officers Hospital, and he dies in 3 days. And then he is the first soldier buried from the Civil War in Slate Hill Cemetery.
First Lieutenant Moses H. Suber, 20th Regiment, PA Cavalry, Company L. Suber enlisted July 4, 1863, at the age of 30 as a private. In the midst of Battle of Gettysburg, calling all able-bodied men to volunteer, he was promoted to lieutenant by July 31st, but died of wounds on October 3, 1863. He is the only African-American soldier buried here at Slate Hill who died of wounds received in the war.
I think it's a great day because we're able to celebrate Civil War veterans, that of color, in this community, it's in a time where the world it's polarized. There's a lot of crazy things going on, a lot of racial inequality that still hasn't been resolved even since then. But for us, to come together as a community and to celebrate, 3 veterans that risked their lives, to stand up for the truth that all men are created equal. I think it's a beautiful thing, so I'm really glad we're doing this today.
Samuel Harmon is a really interesting soldier who is buried in Slate Hill Cemetery in what's called the segregated section. He was 19 and enlisted in the colored troops at Camp William Penn, and he was a drummer, so he didn't even have a gun. And he was on the Sea Islands in Georgia with some of the other soldiers buried here. Horrific fighting. He came back after the war and was a worker. So it is interesting to see that he is not in the field working category. The reason is that Samuel Harmon on his enlistment records is listed as 5'2", blonde-haired and blue-eyed. He's a mulatto, so he passes for white. So he is riding the trolley on his way home from work in Trenton. He falls off the trolley and is killed. And sadly, as we tried to get his stone replaced, we could not find any relatives who wanted to acknowledge that Samuel Harmon, a black man, was the soldier buried here.
Private Samuel Harmon, 24th Regiment, PA Volunteers, Company H. Harmon enlisted in February of 1865, most likely at the age of 16, and enlisted as a drummer. Honorably discharged in October 1865. Harmon married, had children, and then died falling from the trolley right in front of the Slate Hill Cemetery as he returned from work in Trenton in July of 1902.
You know, so many people don't know where they're going because they don't know where they came from. And specifically when it comes to, African Americans serving in the armed forces, a lot of people are not aware that, people of color have died for this country, and being able to understand that and represent that and understand that I'm literally their dream come true. African Americans didn't come here by will, so when we think about that, as I have a bachelor's in history from Morgan State University, understanding the history of America and how we came to be. We're literally a melting pot of every race, ethnicity, and religion and belief. And I think it's so important to remember, your people from the past and reverence that and understand that and really just thank them.
William Hill is in the Navy. He's one of the few of the colored soldiers who is in a unit that is not segregated. So he, with about 25 other black sailors, is on the Harvest Moon. This is the Vice Admiral, actually, Dahlin's flagship, and it is sailing out of Norfolk Harbor. He is on the flagship, and it is mined. It hits a mine in Norfolk Harbor and sinks in 2 minutes. And only 15 feet of the flag is sticking out top of the mast from the ship as it settles on the bottom. At that point, William Hill and the other landsmen are asked to dive into 40 feet of water and climb into the cabin of the Admiral and retrieve his papers. We know this because William Hill complains about it in his pension application, that he has rheumatism now from diving into the harbor. Okay, William Brogdon is one of the soldiers whose tombstones is newly installed. We have just found that he is buried in Slate Hill Cemetery from reading obituaries in the local newspaper. So William Brogdon was older. He immediately was elected as the sergeant of a colored troop that trained at Camp William Penn in Cheltenham. And he and his unit are in some of the worst fighting of the Civil War for the colored troops at the very end of the war, going down to the Battle of Petersburg, being on the Sea Islands where they suffered terrible scurvy, and then actually getting all the way to Richmond. Brogdon his service was amazing. And when he comes back, he is a changed person from being in the Army. And he decides to become a minister. He is a minister of a black congregation in Morrisville and serves until he dies and is honored in his obituary as he's buried in Slate Hill Cemetery.
First Sergeant William Brogdon, 32nd Regiment, PA Volunteers, Company H. Enlisted in February of 1864 at the age of 36. He was promoted to sergeant after horrific unit fighting at Petersburg, and then honorably discharged in August of 1865. He became a local minister and died in 1899.
What's meaningful for me is, obviously I'm an African American myself, and I think I'd really like to know about kind of the people that came before me in terms of having to give back to their country, and particularly a country that didn't really care for African Americans at the time, quite obviously. I mean, obviously the institution of slavery, kind of it being the root cause of the Civil War is a big cause of controversy right now. And I think to kind of come out and learn about the type of people that were willing to fight and serve in that era, kind of something that it's something I think is really underappreciated, and being able to come out and learn about the specific people, particularly the ones that either fought and died or kind of or even the ones that were able to survive and kind of go on the rest of their lives undergoing a lot of discrimination. I think that's something that really deserves a lot of attention.
Well, Slate Hill Cemetery is the oldest cemetery in Bucks County and one of the oldest cemeteries in Pennsylvania. We know that William Yardley is buried there from his will. He asked in his will to be laid in Slate Hill Cemetery, and he died in 1693. So we know that there are very early burials of all the earliest Quakers in Slate Hill Cemetery, and they would have been put right in the ground on top of one another, so literally about 10 deep, in trenches, no boxes, no nothing. There's no markers either, because Quakers did not believe in marking their graves until well into the 19th century. So the earliest part of that cemetery looks vacant because it has thousands of people that are buried there. And it was donated to the Quakers by the owner in 1696. And then he donated another section to actually bury strangers, because even though this was a Quaker stronghold, strangers that are not Quaker are coming in and they need a place to be buried. And then finally in 1788, Joshua Anderson donated a third section for a public graveyard where anybody could be put. And you can read between the lines and understand that that means also colored folk who were in the area, free blacks at this point in Pennsylvania. So largely the three congregations of blacks and Methodists and Presbyterians used the public cemetery for their burials.
On September 26, in the year of 2020, a ceremony was held at the Slate Hill Cemetery to unveil new headstones that were erected to honor 6 African American Civil War soldiers that were buried in the cemetery in Lower Makefield Township. This ceremony of rededication was a public gathering to document and memorialize the sacrifice of African American soldiers who fought for, and in some cases died for, the cause of freedom, which we now enjoy today. In attendance were government officials, veterans, township officials, and local residents who came to pay their respects and show the community that truly all men are created equal. It is our hope, as you learn more about the vital role that African Americans have played in the shaping of our democracy, that a new respect and admiration will contribute to us truly being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice, and equality for all.